The shooter is dead. It looks as though he may have had a relationship with a 16-year-old female who is now in the ICU fighting for her life. A 14-year-old male who was also shot is in stable condition. The other part of this is there was an almost simultaneous firing. You were talking before Governor Hogan said that this was a SWAT team member, about how rare it would be for someone to have a level of training that would allow them to do what perhaps this school resource officer did. This is not the usual circumstance to have a school resource officer who's a SWAT team member as well.
Right. When you're talking about a SWAT team member, you're talking about somebody who's firing thousands and thousands of rounds every year versus, you know, just your mandatory requirement for qualification. And so that's great. He did an amazing job, and all of his training paid off today in a split second, and he probably saved a lot of people at that school.
But what it's almost certainly going to do is reignite this conversation about whether or not there should be more people inside schools who are armed.
This will immediately divide across the country. We'll have people say, look, there was a school resource officer, because they were there armed with a weapon, they were able to take down a perpetrator in a moment's notice. And this did not happen in Parkland. A lot of the circumstances and the differences between the two will be lost on the public. And I think it will just reignite debate, which is, how do we stop school shootings? You know, there are two parts to this. One is the frequency, the other part's the impact. Today, the impact was less, and we had a great school resource officer who did his job in an amazing way. But the frequency is still there. We have school shootings almost on a weekly basis in this country where students are dying, and we haven't addressed that and why that continues to happen, why students have access to weapons and can bring them into schools and can target people. And this sounds like it could have been a very acute scenario. It was somebody the shooter knew that was immediately targeted at the school. We've seen others that are widespread, but irregardless of that, we've got a major problem in this country.
Yeah, and Jim Kavanaugh, you can hear the arguments from people who believe that, for example, teachers should be armed, that there should be more people inside schools with guns who are armed, and use this as example without, as Clint so rightly points out, this is a very different circumstance. This is a kid, the shooter, who is identified as Austin Wyatt Rollins. He had a handgun. He didn't have, as you said, a semi-automatic weapon. He didn't have a weapon that was designed essentially for war. And you had a resource officer, which is, again, a rare thing, who's a SWAT team member.
Right, and Clint gave a clear analysis there. Yes, I agree. You know, the SWAT officer is even trained higher than the average officer, but the average officer is going to have a lot more training than a student. And a lot of these school shootings could be reduced just or a teacher.
Yeah. And
a lot of these shootings could be reduced immediately if parents would lock up the guns. You know, probably in a third of these school shootings, the guns come from home. But just a point that, you know, arming everybody is going to guarantee that everything's okay. Look, we've had ambushes at police stations. In Fairfax County, Virginia, we've had the police ambushed at their station. Pennsylvania State Trooper barracks ambushed. We'd have Las Vegas uniformed officers murdered eating lunch. We've had officers on the West Coast, 4 of them murdered in a coffee shop, all in uniform. We've had attacks on the Dallas Police Headquarters. We've had attacks on the Austin Police Headquarters. We've had attacks on police officers in pairs in radio cars. There's no guarantee, because you have a sidearm, that you can't be ambushed and killed. So we got to understand that just giving teachers guns and a little rudimentary training is not the answer.
Jim Kavanaugh, Clint.